Hello everybody, I'm Tim Bednall and I'm one of the creators of the Australian Leadership Index, or as we call it, the ALI. The other members of the team are Sam Wilson, Melissa Wheeler, Vlad Demsar, Christy Horn and Sylvia Gray. So what is the ALI? Simply put, it's a public opinion survey about the quality of leadership in Australia. We focus on 12 institutions within the government, public, private and not-for-profit sectors, and we ask people how much each of these institutions show leadership for the greater good. But what is leading for the greater good? That was a very difficult question we had to consider when we were designing the index for the first time. We considered many different ideas. We toyed with the idea of triple bottom line reporting, that leadership was the extent to which organisations created economic, social and environmental benefits for Australia. However, we realised there was also an ethical component to leadership that wasn't well captured by this framework. We also looked at models of ethical and responsible leadership. However, all of these frameworks are very individualistic. The value that an organisation creates is not just the product of a single person. In the end, the framework that most informed our thinking was the idea of public value creation. And that's basically the idea that leading for the greater good means creating outcomes that are valuable to people, being responsive to the needs of society rather than just a narrow range of stakeholders, behaving ethically and transparently, and using resources judiciously. And so, we developed a questionnaire around these concepts. But do the public really judge institutions in this way? And that's what we wanted to find out in our first academic paper on the ALI. So what we did was that we looked at the first 2 years of data from the ALI. We focused on the federal government as an institution because that is the organisation that most Australians are familiar with and have equal exposure to. What we found is that everyday Australians seem to judge public value creation a little differently to how academics view it. First of all, they seem to make a general judgment about how good or bad the federal government is. And a large part of that is probably partisanship. So if you're right-wing, you'll probably rate the federal government a lot more favourably than if you're left-wing. But what we also found was that people also judge the government according to two secondary criteria. The first criterion is about what the government is trying to achieve. For instance, whether it is focused on creating positive social, economic and environment outcomes. The second judgment is about how the government acts. It's related to whether the government is seen to be ethical, transparent and accountable. So it's essentially public trust. What we also wanted to look at was, do the ALI scores change in response to big events, such as a scandal breaking out? When we first started tracking the ALI, Scott Morrison had just become Prime Minister. We found that people's view of the federal government was generally unfavourable, even after winning the 2019 election. However, we did find that there were two events that did result in quite big shifts in perceptions. The first was the Australian bushfires. We found there was a fairly big decline in ALI ratings as many people saw that the crisis was not managed well. The second one was the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, and this saw a reversal in the government's misfortunes, with their ALI scores increasing quite a lot. And this is probably because the federal government responded quite quickly to the crisis. They set up the National Cabinet to work together with the state governments, and they committed a lot of resources to schemes such as JobKeeper. So that's the work on the ALI in a nutshell. I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. If you have any further questions about the ALI or this project, please do not hesitate to contact me or any other members of the team.